If you ask a CEO or maybe a wartime general what the best way to make decisions is, they probably say centralized authority.
Oh, absolutely.
There's this old idea, and it still kind of haunts us, that all political power has to be in one place with one person or group to be effective.
Right.
The thinking is basically sharing power equals dividing power, which, well, that just means you're weakening the country.
It's such an intuitive trap, isn't it? Because it makes governance sound like this zero-sum game of just pure efficiency. But the whole principle we're digging into today, it just challenges that completely.
So what's the counter argument?
Well, in a real democracy, power isn't supposed to be this single, indivisible thing.
Yeah.
Actually, an intelligent, really intentional distribution of authority, between the legislature, the executive, the judiciary. That's not a sign of weakness. It's the absolute core design feature of a stable country.
Exactly. And we talk about checks and balances, but it's often so abstract. Today, we're going to run this idea through two, extreme real-world stress tests. We're looking at two democracies, Belgium and Sri Lanka. They faced almost identical challenges, deep social and linguistic diversity, but they chose radically different paths.
And that's what makes it such a perfect contrast for our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We want to move beyond just the definitions and really show you why power sharing isn't just the politically nice thing to do.
It's more than that.
It's the strategically necessary thing to do for long-term survival. We'll look at the cold practical reasons, the prudential ones, and the deeper moral reasons for it.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's start with what I think is a complicated marvel of accommodation. Belgium.
Right.
So this is a pretty compact European nation. To give you some perspective, it's smaller than the state of Haryana in India, a population of just over 1 crore, or about 11 million people.
Tiny. But that small geography holds an incredible amount of linguistic volatility. It's a real pressure cooker of diversity.
How does it break down?
So when you look at the map, 59% of the people live in the Flemish region, and they speak Dutch. They're the national majority.
Okay.
Then you have 40% who live in the southern Wallonia region. They speak French. And then there's a tiny 1% who speak German.
But here's where it gets really tricky and where the conflict really started. The capital city, Brussels.
Yes, the Brussels paradox.
Even though the country as a whole has a Dutch-speaking majority, if you go into the capital, the situation just flips completely. 80% of the people there speak French and only 20% speak Dutch.
It's a minority-majority island right in the middle of a majority region. And that reversal, it fueled so much historical conflict, especially in the 1950s and 60s.
What was the root of that tension?
Well, for a long time, the minority French-speaking community was actually the wealthy and powerful one. They got the benefits of industrialization and education much earlier. And this created this deep resentment among the Dutch-speaking community who felt like, hey, we're the majority now, but we're only just getting these benefits.
So the Belgian leaders had this huge choice to make. They could either let the Dutch-speaking majority impose its will, which everyone said would lead to chaos, maybe even the country splitting up.
Or they could try something completely different.
And they chose accommodation, but this wasn't like a one-time thing, right? It was a process.
A long process.
Yeah.
Between 1970 and 1993, they amended their constitution 4 separate times to engineer this unique framework so everyone could live together.
And what did that framework actually look like?
Well, this is why the Belgian model is studied all over the world. The first key element they brought in was central government parity.
Parity, so equality.
Exactly. The Constitution says there has to be an equal number of Dutch and French-speaking ministers in the central government. It doesn't matter who wins the election, the cabinet has to be balanced.
Wait, hold on. That sounds unbelievably bureaucratic. How can anything get done if it's always balanced 50-50? Doesn't that just create gridlock?
That's the strategic trade-off they made. They gave up some efficiency for guaranteed stability. And the crucial part wasn't just the equal numbers. It was that certain special laws, really fundamental ones, required the support of a majority from each linguistic group.
Oh, I see.
So the majority can't just steamroll the minority on the big issues. It forces them to actually negotiate.
It's like a built-in mutual veto. Okay, so what was the second element?
Decentralization. They deliberately moved a lot of power from the central government down to new state governments for the Flemish and Wallonia regions.
And these weren't just puppets of the central government.
Not at all. The
Right.
sources are really clear on this. They are not subordinate. They have real autonomy in their own areas.
And then, of course, they had to solve the Brussels problem.
Yes, the Brussels paradox, the third element, The capital got its own separate government, and again, they guaranteed equal representation for both communities.
Which must have been a huge concession for the French speakers in Brussels, since they were the big majority there.
It was a massive concession, but they only agreed to it because the Dutch-speaking majority nationally had already agreed to parity in the central government. It was a package deal, a trade.
And the final piece, which seems like the most innovative one, is the community government.
It's brilliant, really.
Yeah.
This is a third layer of government.
Yeah.
It's elected by people from one language group, Dutch, French, or German, no matter where they actually live.
So, how does that work?
Well, think of it this way. If you're a French speaker living in the Flemish region, your community is still represented by this government, which handles things like culture, education, and language. It protects your identity.
The outcome is pretty undeniable, even if the system is, well, dizzying to think about.
It worked. It avoided civil strife, it kept the country from breaking apart, and it made the country so stable that Brussels was chosen as the headquarters for the entire European Union.
They literally bought peace through complexity.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, so now let's look at the dramatic contrast. Let's move over to Sri Lanka. An island nation, population of about 2 crore or so, similar in scale to Belgium in some ways, but they chose the path of forced dominance.
A completely different story. Sri Lanka's social mix is also diverse, but the majority is much larger. You have 74% who are Sinhala speakers, and most are Buddhist.
And the minority?
The Tamil speakers make up about 18%. They're mostly Hindu or Muslim. And you also have a group of Christians, about 7%, spread across both communities.
So after Sri Lanka got independence in 1948, the Sinhala leaders pretty much immediately tried to secure absolute dominance, just using their numbers.
And this is where we get the textbook definition of majoritarianism. It's this belief that the majority community should be able to rule a country however it wants.
Completely ignoring the wishes and needs of the minority.
Completely. And they didn't waste any time putting this into law. In 1956, they passed an act that made Sinhala the only official language. It basically just disregarded Tamil entirely.
It's a huge symbolic act, right?
Okay.
It sends a clear message.
It tells the Tamil population that their identity is secondary, non-essential to the state.
And it didn't start with language.
No. The government then brought in preferential policies that favored Sinhala applicants for university spots and for government jobs. And on top of that, the new constitution said that the state had to protect and foster Buddhism.
Which would obviously alienate the Hindu and Muslim Tamils.
All of these things, one after another, created this growing sense of alienation among the Sri Lankan Tamils. They felt they were being denied equal rights, discriminated against, just completely ignored.
The reaction was pretty predictable, I imagine.
Entirely. The Tamils started launching struggles for regional autonomy, for more control over the north and east of the country where they were concentrated. But their demands were just denied, again and again.
It's a tragic political miscalculation.
It is. The short-term political win of appealing to your majority base results in this catastrophic long-term national suffering. The distrust just got deeper and turned into conflict. By the 1980s, you had political groups demanding an independent Tamil state in Elam.
And this all boiled over into a devastating civil war.
A terrible civil war that lasted for decades, finally ending in 2009. The consequences were just immeasurable. Thousands dead, families forced to become refugees, livelihoods destroyed.
A massive setback for the country.
A terrible setback. It's just a devastating irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
Belgium embraced complexity to buy peace. Sri Lanka embraced a kind of political simplicity majority rule, and the cost was decades of violence.
The contrast is so stark, and it leads us right to the reasons for power sharing. We can stop debating if it's a good idea and start talking about why it's so necessary. Let's start with the practical reason, the prudential reason.
Right. The cold, cynical calculation is that sharing power is simply cheaper than paying for a civil war.
That's one way to put it.
The prudential reason just states that power sharing reduces the chance of conflict. And since social conflict leads to violence and instability, well, sharing power is just good governance. It ensures stability.
So this is the key insight. Forcing the majority's will might look like a win in the short term, but it just eats away at national unity over time.
Exactly. The tyranny of the majority, as they call it, isn't just bad for the minority. The case of Sri Lanka shows it ends up hurting the majority, too. Economic ruin, loss of life.
Yeah.
Nobody wins.
So that's the practical argument. It's about consequences, but there's a deeper one, right? The moral reason.
Yes, the moral argument gets to the very spirit of what democracy is supposed to be about.
And what defines that moral core?
The moral reason holds that a democratic government has to share power with the people who are affected by its decisions. People have a right to be consulted on how they're governed.
So it's about legitimacy.
It is. A government is legitimate only when its citizens, through participation, feel like they have a real stake in the system. It's about the intrinsic worth of every citizen.
It's the idea that everyone should feel like they have a hand on the steering wheel, even if they have to share the driver's seat.
And we see this even when it's not about ethnicity. The source material had that great cartoon about Germany's Grand Coalition.
Right, where the two rival parties are literally sharing a steering wheel.
A perfect example. In 2005, the two main rival parties in Germany had to form a coalition because neither could win a majority alone. They had completely different policies, but for the country to function, they had to share power. It became a non-negotiable mechanism for stability.
Okay, so that philosophical groundwork brings us to the actual structure of modern governance. We're moving beyond just ethnicity now to how political power is intentionally spread out in democracies.
And we really see four basic ways this happens. The first is the one we're all most familiar with, the horizontal distribution of power.
The system of checks and balances.
Exactly. Power is shared among different parts of government at the same level, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary.
And the whole point is that no single part can get too powerful. The judiciary can check the legislature and so on. It ensures a balance.
Right. The second form is the vertical division of power. You might know it as federalism.
So this is where power is shared between governments at different levels. A central government for the whole country, and then state or provincial governments.
And this connects directly back to our case studies, doesn't it? This is exactly the federal path Belgium chose, giving real autonomy to its regions.
And it's precisely the structure Sri Lanka refused to implement.
Right. The third form is sharing power among different social groups. We saw the clearest example of this with that community government in Belgium, which carves out space for linguistic groups.
But we see this in other places too, like reserved constituencies for weaker sections or for women in government.
The intention there is strategic. It's to prevent the alienation of communities who might otherwise feel completely shut out of the system. It gives them a guaranteed share in power.
And finally, the fourth form, which is more dynamic, it involves political parties and interest groups.
This is where competition between parties ensure that power doesn't just stay in one place for too long.
And this sharing can be direct, right? Like in coalition governments.
Yes, where different parties have to team up to govern. Or it can be indirect, where, powerful interest groups, traders, farmers' unions, industry groups influence decisions by putting pressure on the government.
So the ultimate lesson here seems to be that power sharing isn't just some academic idea, it's a survival strategy.
It is. It's the way a diverse society ensures peace and stability.
Oh.
That's the prudential, practical argument.
While at the same time, it upholds the basic right of every citizen to participate in their own government. That's the moral argument.
But chasing that stability sometimes forces countries into these really complex arrangements that seem to go against the simple ideal of democracy, majority rule.
Which brings us to one last really tricky dilemma. A story from Beirut in Lebanon. After their own devastating civil war, Lebanon's leaders came up with a very specific, very complicated power-sharing pact. It's based entirely on religious sect.
The rigid formula.
Super rigid. The pact says the president must be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker a Shia Muslim.
And this was set up when those populations were roughly balanced. But today, the demographics have shifted. Muslims are now the clear majority.
So the story is about a man named Khalil. He doesn't want to identify by his father's Christian religion or his mother's Muslim one. He's ambitious, but he can never become president because of this pact. And he asks, why can't we just be a normal democracy?
Just hold an election and whoever gets the most votes wins.
Exactly. But his elders, the ones who lived through the war, they tell him no. They say this complex, guaranteed system is the only thing keeping the peace.
So that's the final question we want to leave you with. If you had the power to rewrite the rules in Lebanon, what would you do? Would you go with Khalil and adopt the regular rules of majority vote?
Or would you stick with the complex sharing pact that the elders say is the only guarantee of stability in a society that's so deeply divided? What does that choice really tell us about the true price of peace?